our first question from Costas Lianos with Daily Express.
Hi, Shawn. How are you?
Very good.
Excellent. It's great to talk to you again. Now, Randy Orton had a lot to say about the NXT roster recently and had some strong words as well. He said the NXT guys worry him because of their high-risk matches. He also suggested there's very little storyline in their matches that don't allow fans to invest into them. He also claimed that could all lead to their careers being cut short. How do you respond to all that?
Hey, Randy's certainly welcome to his opinion. And certainly there are people that think that way. People thought that way about me. I certainly understand it. I can remember being young and thinking like, I don't know what they're talking about. And then you get older and you do realize what they're talking about. What I've learned is one has to come about any kind of wisdom in this line of work and a philosophy about this line of work in their own time. I think it's very tough to force people to learn a lot of stuff. They have a tendency to rebel against that. And so I feel that you have to sort of learn that stuff as you go and find what works for you, what you're comfortable with, what is your balance out there, your psychology, what you think works best for you. Everybody, I think, ultimately tries to work to their strengths. So I always understand both sides because I was a guy that was told I went too fast and did too much. As I got older, I did even try to pull back on that, but not as much as some people did. So everybody's going to have an opinion on how you go about doing your job, and they have every right to it. You just have to be one with whatever it is you pick, to be your style and your philosophy. You just need to stick with it, not waver from it, and adjust it as you see fit. That's all you can really do. Again, and I guess I always like to think that while everyone's welcome to their opinion, one of the things that I think always makes WWE fun and enjoyable is that everyone does have those different philosophies, and it keeps things interesting. It keeps things mixed up, and just by virtue of the fact that all of that's going on, it gives us some diversity in our styles and whatnot. And I always think that's a positive. If everybody's the same, it might become a little bit less fun to watch.
And with no response, we will move on to our next question from Matty Paddock with the Daily Star.
Good afternoon from the UK, Shawn. I hope you're well. Great to be able to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'd love to just be able to pick your brains, really, because especially during your first run as WWE champion, it was synonymous, really, with the connection you and your character had with the live crowds, and that really stood you in great stead for the rest of your career. So I'd love to know, first of all, your thoughts on how the guys coming through now are adapting to the challenge of performing without live crowds, and also, how do you think the Shawn Michaels in his prime would cope with the same challenge now if your career was just beginning?
Oh, as I've expressed to a lot of them, it would be really challenging. Certainly for me. I will say for me, the enthusiastic things about it is it was a situation that none of us had dealt with. A lot of times, certainly from the coaching standpoint, you've experienced just about everything, and you can draw from that experience, perhaps maybe to help or shed light on something. This was a situation where all of us were learning, and for me, I enjoy that. I love it when I learn something new, especially about the wrestling business and the WWE in general. So it was interesting. It was fun and enjoyable for everybody, I think, to try to figure out what worked best, experiment with some things, try some different, psychologies out and whatnot. And I expressed all of them. I honestly don't know how I would have responded because, to your point, I really did draw off of that energy from the building. I can remember the few times, again, when I came back after 4 years being off, it was really encouraged to go, get in that ring and just try a few things to, see how much rust was there. And Hunter and I went in the ring, and I think I did the sunset flip, and I said, that's it. I'm not doing anything else. I can't do it. I said, it's either going to have to be there come game time or it's not, because it was just tough doing it in that sterile environment without anybody there. I will say that they adjusted to it great. They did a phenomenal job. And then after a while, it sort of becomes your normal. It's amazing how quickly, I guess, and that's one of the things that I always think is unique about the WWE and the wrestling business in general is we're almost an entity unto ourselves in that we can make just about anything doable in the wrestling business. And I guess that was a real advantage for all of us in this particular time. But I will say it was certainly challenging from my standpoint, just from, again, encountering something that I never had. So it was interesting and fun all at the same time, but I think they've adjusted to it well and just done a phenomenal job. And it's been, honestly, I think, a fun experience for all of us.
We'll take our next question from Vincent Diaz with Marcus.
Hello, Shawn. Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Sir.
Okay, thank you so much for the waiting. Thank you also so much for your time. We know you are very busy these days. But I would like to ask you about your rivalries, because as they say, it takes two to tango. And we've seen a lot of great rivalries in WWE over the years, from Hogan and Andre to Flair and Steamboat, The Rock and Austin. But you have also some of the best matches in history with The Undertaker, Ric Flair, or Triple H. Who gave you the best rivalry you've ever had, and why you think so?
Well, I think it's got to be, even though it's tough on both, it's got to be Bret Hart, right? I mean, my goodness, how do you mention me and not think of Bret and I? And obviously, as everyone knows, certainly it spilled over into real life. But again, all these years later, I don't know. You have to look. I know I do. I look back on it with fondness, simply because it was something that was so palpable, and people felt it. So as proud as I am of all those other rivalries, I think it's hard for me not to mention that one being right up there. With Triple H. I mean, again, I think he and I, even though now certainly everybody has always associated, both of us with our friendship that I think they always knew was very real and palpable. We still managed to cross one another backwards and forwards, good guy, bad guy, medium guys tagging together. We did a lot of stuff together, Triple H and I, that you couldn't always get away with, but because people knew the behind-the-scenes story on he and I, it somehow always seemed to make sense. They could understand us fighting each other because they knew we were both really competitive and competitive with one another. And that always added to the storyline. So I'd have to say in the first part of my career, you'd say Bret Hart, and in the second part, I think I'd have to say Triple H.
We'll take our next question from Kenny McIntosh from Inside the Ropes.
Hey, Shawn, how's it going? Good to talk to you.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Listen, I wanted to ask you about the Last Ride documentary. Obviously, Chapter 4 comes out on Sunday, and Chapter 3 kind of focused on the big tag match at Crown Jewel with you and Hunter against Kane and Taker. And the whole story of the documentary seems to be Taker's kind of, his desire to have that perfect retirement, which obviously you had back in 2010. Have you talked to Taker about it? Have you got any advice for him in terms of finding that perfect one, and in terms of redemption? Would you want to do something else after Crown Jewel, or do you kind of plan to leave it there as well?
No, and I will say, so honestly, I was like a lot of people, finding out a lot of things about Mark that I did not know until the documentary. He's always been very close to the vest on a lot of that stuff. Now, I will say I did know, again, so the year after we had my last match, we were sitting at a baggage claim and waiting on the bags, and Zero was getting inducted to the Hall of Fame, and he looked at me and he said, "You made the right choice. Perfect time to go out." But fast forward to the tag match, I had no idea that in his mind, if that had gone well, he might have possibly been able to, retire on that. I assumed, I guess, unfortunately, that he was more looking towards that WrestleMania moment. So I will say that I just looked at that match as just another tag match, and just sort of an opportunity for me to go out there with my buddies and just have some fun and not take anything too seriously. I did not know that was a situation where, had it gone well, it might have made it easier for him to walk away. I will say that, again, I think that a lot of those moments for me, it certainly had to be because of WrestleMania, with it being him. Everything just fell into line from my standpoint, which made it a lot easier to walk away. I assumed that his needed, in his mind, sort of needed to be the same way, and it being a WrestleMania moment. So again, as you mentioned, it's I don't know. Again, it was something that was interesting to me to know that. I don't know. Again, I knew that it was a struggle. I did not know that it was quite the depth of struggle that it was, because he's always just been on the surface so very balanced in that respect. And look, I'll say this: it was nice to know that that he is. He's like all the rest of us. He's got all the same emotions. He just didn't show them.
Thanks.
We'll take our next question from Christian Bruns with Power Wrestling.
Hey, Shawn. Good afternoon from Germany. So, Edge returned in WWE after a nearly decade-long break. You were in a very similar situation at one point in your career, retiring in '98 and returning in 2002. How do you recall what your mindset was like when you had your comeback in 2002? Does the old confidence return quickly, or are there like self-doubts in play, or maybe thinking about how the fans are going to react after a long break like that? And how do you think Edge is handling all of this for himself now?
I think all those emotions you said play into it. So you certainly, the biggest attribute is you hearing, just like Edge did, because he and I have had the opportunity to talk about it briefly. When you hear a doctor say you're done and you can no longer do this, you take them at their word. They're doctors. They've gone to school for 8-10 years. They know what they're talking about. And then you sort of get the idea that there's possibility, or there's an openness, or that finality that they once spoke of is no longer there for whatever reason. Some different things change, more advancements in medicine. Perhaps the doctor's not truly grasping the ability in our line of work to possibly work around certain situations. Just a number of variables first get introduced that begins, the idea that, maybe I can do this. Then once you make that decision, all that doubt, all your worries sort of creep in, because this stuff is hard enough to do just by itself, even when you're doing it all the time. And then the idea of being away from it, as everyone, I'm sure you've all heard in different interviews from various superstars over the years, it is not like riding a bike. You don't just get back on and it's a piece of cake. So a lot of those things happen, all of that doubt. And then, of course, it's the idea of, well, then you balance do I come back and get a couple under my belt to get some of that ring rust off? But then how do I do that and make this one return big and special? So there are a number of different aspects that go on to making it an incredibly difficult decision. And then, of course, delivering on that decision. And then once you do all of that, then you have to go out there and perform. That's where the most anxiety is. And it doesn't leave until it's over. And hopefully it goes well and that anxiety and stress and everything dissipates and is gone, or it doesn't go the way you think about it. And that's where one can get into that situation of chasing the dragon, as we say.
Take our next question from Alex McCarthy with TalkSport.
Hi, Shawn. How you doing?
Excellent.
Great. What I wanted to really talk about was, obviously you're a performer that, being synonymous with you, is kind of having these great matches, and we're talking about the greatest match ever. But in the same vein, Undertaker has been looking for that perfect closure, as we talked about. I think even in the next episode, you talk about being able to look at the portrait and being happy with your line of work. You seem to be able to do that. But over the years, there's been recurring rumours, like I think AJ Styles was very open about wanting to have a match with you. Daniel Bryan, that rumour went with teacher versus student. Talk to me about, is there the artist in you or the perfectionist that has the same struggles that Undertaker kind of has, or is searching, and, you contemplated it, or, just the idea of having that great match drove you and made you contemplate it? Were there any names like that?
Well, no, I mean, honestly, again, I when I made the decision and then had the match with Undertaker, I was at complete peace and have been that way ever since. Certainly, when it comes to seeing other talent that you admire or you think is really good, it's hard not to think to yourself, like, oh my goodness, had they been available in my generation, I could have really had fantastic matches with him. But I also thought about that from the standpoint of people that were before me that I watched on TV and grew up with, the Harley races and the original Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher and stuff like that, Dusty Rhodes, Wahoo McDaniels. There were a number of people that I grew up with that I thought the same thing, like, oh my goodness, wouldn't that be awesome? And that's what made things, again, like Flair, Hogan, Tully and Arn. Some of those people, I did have that opportunity, and that's always fun for the 15-year-old boy that's inside you. So again, you certainly, you think about it in your head, but at no time was there ever really a pull or a desire or anything that I had to struggle with about coming back. I've always been at 100% peace with the decision I made. And honestly, I don't know that I ever grasped quite how, beneficial I was to feel that way. As I've seen so many people before and after struggle with it, I consider myself so fortunate for being able to have that, because I really do now see how rare it is and how special it is. So again, on top of being okay with it, I also enjoy I'm so thankful that I am, because I can see that it's, for some folks, it is hard. And again, that's a shame because all of the people that do, again, whether it's Flair or Taker, they've had spectacular careers, and it's unbelievably special to those of us that have seen it. But even with, again, as we talked about earlier, with the talent and their styles, you have to be there. It's most important for that individual to be at peace with himself. Doesn't matter how we the fans feel or their peers feel. That individual has to feel peace with whatever it is they're doing or whatever decision they're making, and that's the most important thing through all of this.
Take our next question from Giuseppe Di Giovanni with La Gazzetta dello Sport.
Hi, Shawn. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Okay, Shawn. The question for me is a lot of people, of performer, a lot of people say this is the next Shawn Michaels. This is the next Shawn Michaels. In all those next Shawn Michaels, who do you think that is more similar than Shawn Michaels?
Well, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think they're all individuals. So again, there's the part of me that says, oh, I appreciate people even that I'm even able to be, I don't know, I'm some kind of model for somebody to be the next of. I'm thankful for that on one hand over here to the left and on the right. I just think that happens in everything, in every sport, in every line of work. There's always another person that does it well or does it better, whatever the case may be. Again, the Michael Jordans into the LeBron James, and it happens in basketball, baseball, football. It happens in the WWE. It happens in the wrestling business. It happens in soccer and rugby, all as it's supposed to. So it's hard for me to say who it is. I mean, I would agree with the people that they do make the comparisons to. I mean, they're all very talented individuals. But as I once said to Chris Jericho many years ago, and he's told people since, it's important that you be the first and best you can be. And I think that's what most people are trying to do. And as much as they may appreciate the comparison as I do, they want to be an individual and be recognized for their individual work and excellence of the craft.
We'll take our next question from Alistair McGeorge with Metro UK.
Hi, Shawn. How's it going?
Very good.
Good. Glad to hear it. So this weekend we've all heard the tagline, the greatest wrestling match ever. I was wondering, first of all, what was your reaction when you first heard that tagline was what they were going with for the match, and also what Randy and Edge can do to live up to that kind of pressure?
Well, so again, and I mean this lovingly, because there's so many things about the wrestling business that I don't know. At first, when I heard about it, I was thinking to myself, man, I got to see that. I did not know it had not taken place yet until I was asked to do interviews for it on SmackDown. And of course, that was my question, was like, oh, it hasn't happened yet? And they're like, no, it's being built. Like, oh my goodness. I thought to myself, my goodness, why don't they put a little more pressure on those guys? That's a tough billing to live up to. But look, they're no different than the rest of us. Everybody loves the challenge. Again, so it's the WWE. Everybody understands what the big E means in our line of work. But at the same time, there's still competition. You still want to go out there with the guy you're in the ring with and have the absolute best match you can. And everybody, believe it or not, I think for the most part, goes out there trying to have the greatest wrestling match ever. Look, you as the fans, and the performers sort of, I guess, ultimately make that decision. But at the same time, that's what everybody's trying to do. And sure, putting that billing on there is a tough bar to attain. But at the same time, Randy and Edge, they're both pros. They were going to go out there and more than likely try to do that anyway, because that's just in their DNA. So this is just added fuel to the fire. And look, they are no dummies. They certainly wouldn't. I guess I don't think they'd put this or supported this tagline, so to speak, or this promotion, if they weren't really challenged and willing to try to live up to it. And I appreciate that. Again, this business is, I don't know. I think I like people that take risks like that. I'm sorry. I'm somebody that did the same thing. Now, I'll grant you, not to that extent. And I've certainly grown into almost a 55-year-old guy that can't stand taking risks anymore. But at the same time, when you're in this stuff and you want to continue to drive it or leave your mark, sometimes taking risks is exactly what you want to do. And I appreciate the fact that these guys, both of them have a set on themselves that's big enough to give it a try. And for me, I support that.
We'll take our next question from Miguel Perez with Marca.
Hey, Shawn from Spain. How are you? Hello?
Hello? Oh, I can barely hear you.
Oh, okay. From Spain. How are you?
Very good.
I want to thank you for having us today, and it's an amazing pleasure to talk with you, one of the most important legends in professional wrestling of all time. So let's start. During the last hours, WWE announced that Bruce Prichard will replace Paul Heyman to be in charge of Raw and SmackDown and run their shows. What's your opinion about this? Do you think that WWE shows will improve in the few next months with Bruce Prichard in charge? Or do you think that Paul Heyman fits better in this role?
Well, that's one of those. I will say that I have very little to do, and little to do means absolutely nothing with Raw and SmackDown. I'm like everybody that's on this phone call. I hear about those things as you do, believe it or not, because I do everything I can to just stay focused in the world of NXT. And that's, so again, I don't know how anyone arrives at those decisions. But I know that I can't say this. I've been here for almost 35 years. Every decision that is made, whether anyone agrees or disagrees, is always in an effort to advance the WWE as a whole forward. And so I know these decisions were made certainly with every intention and every attempt to do that. But for any of the personal reasons and stuff like that, I am sincere and honest in saying I don't know how any of those things come about or in the least. And certainly, hopefully, everybody will pull the rope in the same direction, and it will, do what it's supposed to do, which is advance the WWE forward.
We'll take our next question from Jude Albajani with Podcast.
Hello, Shawn. Hope you're doing good.
I am. Thank you very much.
I have a quick question for you. How would you compare the current new generation wrestling audience, their ongoing needs, with the different generations of audience that you have experienced before?
Well, I think they change and advance and grow just as the performers do. I will say this, though. I think, like with anything, there's positives and negatives to it. They're so much smarter and more sophisticated, and I think that's a fantastic thing. They see a lot of these smaller nuances and whatnot, which I always think is fun and makes the job so much more enjoyable as a talent and for our talent. But at the same time, in their effort to do that exact same thing, pay attention to everything. Sometimes they may have the opportunity of enjoying it less. But again, those things happen, and I think everybody right now. I know this. I know that people enjoy Wednesday nights, and that's important. And to be a part of that, I think is fantastic for us doing it in NXT. It's a joy, and we like to. I don't know. We are thrilled with what we're doing, and NXT. That's why again, so many people love it. So many people want to, stay here and work here. I can't give all the reasons why the wrestling business does what it does sometimes, whether it be from a standpoint or even company standpoints. All I know is that when we as a talent were in the ring, that was our time to shine and do what we love to do. And that is one thing that I can say as a whole from the entire body that is NXT. We try to do that all the time. And 99.9% of the time we do. And that's why everybody loves working there.
We'll take our next question from Nims Azor with Sydney, Australia.
Hi, Shawn. Good to chat to you. I hope you're going well. You talk about NXT. Here in Australia, we pay very close attention because we've got a lot of Australians there. What's some of your thoughts on some of the talent like Brendan Vink, Shane Thorne, or Indy Hartwell, or even Rhea Ripley, former champion? And what do you think their ceiling is in the WWE? Do you think they can reach the same levels like Murphy or the Iconics can on Raw or SmackDown?
I do. I will say some of the Shane Thorne, a little bittersweet for me because I was going to have an opportunity to have him in the UK. But I'm thrilled for him. Obviously, Shane's put in so much work. He's been such a leader for us at the Performance Center. So I'm thrilled for him and his success. I think everybody would agree. Come on, Rhea Ripley's ceiling is, let's put it this way, she hasn't reached it. And I will say that when you didn't mention Bronson Reed, I've just, recently been getting the opportunity to work with him. Phenomenal young man, amazing some of the stuff he can do for a big man. So I think Bronson's got a lot more legs to him than what we've seen thus far. He's just starting out. So, and another one, as you mentioned, Indy Hartwell. She's one that, again, I've had my eye on for quite some time. And again, this pandemic sort of made it a little tough on me because, again, her and Shane were two people that I was going to see if I could finagle into my NXT UK version. So, still have some of those intentions for people, but again, because there's so much, there's so many questions right now for some of them that I don't know what the future holds. All I know is that right now, Shane and Brendan Vink are getting advanced, to Raw and SmackDown, or at least one of them, and that's huge for them. And that just sort of came out of the blue. So I would say, again, the Australian crop altogether has just been doing phenomenal work. And that's one of those things, again, to your point, I think that's been a sleeper. It really has. That's something that I don't know that we often maybe focus on as much as we do, that is a big move. That is a big commitment for all those talents that make that move to Orlando in hopes to advancing their careers in the WWE. And I'm always impressed by it. And the thing that I enjoy about all of them is there isn't a one of them that isn't honestly a wonderful human being, which is always a huge plus.
We'll take our next question from Lou Zangor with Wrestle Talk.
Hi, Shawn. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
You betcha.
Obviously, there's the greatest wrestling match ever tagline going into Backlash this weekend. So, as someone who's been around the business for a while and has had a plethora of great matches, I wanted to ask you about what you think makes a great wrestling match, and almost watching as someone in the business as a fan, what do you go into a match hoping for?
Well, I will say this. So, as a fan, even after all these years, I don't go into it expecting anything except being open to what it is they're going to give me, and then they take me on the ride. And I think I will say that I still, after all these years of being in this business, I have not become desensitized and go in with a lot of preconditions or pre-notions or pre-standards to what I think it should be. And maybe that comes from doing it. I don't know, because I know all of the thoughts and ideas and work that goes into putting together certainly something on pay-per-view or on TV. There's a lot of time and effort by a lot of people. So from my standpoint, I always go into it pretty open to again, it's let's see what you're going to give me and go on the ride. And look, I think that's as a performer, I think what you do is you try to think of all the things that are going into this match, your storyline, what makes sense, what's the last thing you did. I will say this, a lot of the times it's nice to see what we call the package, that sort of that little 2 or 3 minute video that sort of encapsulates your storyline and the things you've done and who you are and who your opponent is, all the things that go into sort of have a way of dictating how you sort of put that match together. But look, the end-all be-all is you do everything you can to put what you believe should be in there, and usually the greatness and all the things that take it to that great level are the things that you feel out there while you're doing it. And it is impossible to think of that in advance. It's impossible to sort of automatically do, because it comes across that way. Some things have to be in the moment, have to be real, have to be pure, unadulterated, real life emotion capturing that moment. And I think that's what usually takes it over the top, because there are a lot of moves that happen that everyone at home can't do and they can't associate with. But there is an emotion in the world that the viewer has not experienced. And that's what makes the difference, is connecting on an emotional level with your audience.
Cassie, we have time for two more questions.
We will take our next question from Stephanie Chase with Digital Spy.
Hi, Shawn. Through most of your career, through most of your career, social media, particularly Twitter, didn't exist. Is it something you're glad you didn't have maybe in around 1997? And do you think it's something wrestlers can and should use to start feuds?
I will say that I'm happy that it wasn't. certainly earlier in my career because I'd done a lot of dumb stuff. But I will say that it can certainly be an advantage. I think it's a delicate balance. To your point, I don't know that we truly even have mastered what's the best way to balance that. Again, I think there's some positives to it. I think there's some negatives to it, and it's tricky. And that's one of the things also from a coaching standpoint that I talk about is trying to. We didn't have that, and I'm always very leery about telling someone how they should do something that I haven't experienced. And you just do your best to balance that out in a way that I guess is conducive or makes sense from the wrestling business. There's a lot of real life things that we draw from in our television show. But being able to balance that with what's too much or what isn't enough is challenging. And that's a new aspect of the wrestling business that this generation has to try to work with that we didn't have. And I do recognize it as a challenge and certainly do what I can to help. But I'm not someone that has a ton of experience in that. So, I'm always pretty delicate about, about saying anything in respect to that because I don't have a concrete answer. And I apologize. That's not a concrete answer, but it really is. I find that to be challenging for the talent, and I don't honestly know what the best way is to do with that.
We'll take our last question from Kenny McIntosh with Inside the Ropes.
Hey, Shawn. I just wanted to ask you this one thing before we go. Obviously, when Triple H had his big anniversary on SmackDown, when Vince McMahon came out and joined you guys, it just seemed like you guys were having so much fun. You were popping all over the place. What was that experience like for you, kind of getting to really have some fun and kind of roast Triple H?
It was a lot of fun. And so, yeah, it's just real life stuff coming out. He and I are two kids where we are getting to do what we never thought we'd be able to do, which is it's called NXT now, obviously, but to get to have a hand and work with, the stars of tomorrow hand in hand with one another, talking about wrestling is just a blast for us each and every day. There is no pretend. There is not anything that is quote unquote a work with he and I when we're out there. It is 100% fun, enjoyment, love, all those silly things. And every now and then they let us do it on TV, and that's fun. It's certainly fun for us, and it appears that here and there it's fun with the casual fans that understand it. Other people it grates on their nerves a little bit. I apologize for that, but it's just two guys living a dream that honestly at one time when they were driving around in the car before they quote unquote made it, it was a world and a life we never thought we'd have. And we absolutely enjoy the fact that we're doing it now, and sometimes that shows.
Well, with that, we want to thank everyone for your questions and thank you for your time in joining us. And we particularly want to give a big thanks to Shawn for his time today. Shawn, before we go, I think there's one question that it would be a shame for us not to put to you before we leave. We have been talking a lot about Backlash. We've been talking a lot about Edge and Randy. I mean, if you were pushed as someone with the knowledge and experience to know what they're thinking going into it, who do you think has maybe got the edge, pardon the pun, going in? Is it Edge or is it Randy this Sunday?
Well, so again, as I've stated before, I lean towards Edge, but I think I will say most of that is personal. And again, Love Randy, unbelievably talented, but I know what it's like to be that older guy and wanting to make a statement, coming back from an injury, the expectations that are on you, the desire to over-deliver. For Randy, it's another day at the office, so to speak. Yes, it's big, but make no mistake about it, Randy will have a career much longer after this. For Edge, you don't know that those things are true. So he's allowed to focus on one singular moment. And I always feel like, you know, with that, you have the advantage. So I'm leaning towards Edge.